My ex-husband promised our daughter a car for her birthday, but instead spent all the money on an expensive vacation for his stepdaughter. Then lied to cover it up and called our daughter entitled when she discovered the truth on social media. Hello everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm 42 years old. And today I'm going to tell you about how my ex-husband broke his promise to buy our daughter a car for her 16th birthday, instead spending all that money on an expensive vacation for his stepdaughter, and then had the audacity to call our daughter entitled when she discovered his betrayal through social media. This is a story about broken promises, favoritism, parental betrayal, and a father who chose his new family over the daughter he claims to love. I never imagined my ex would hurt our child so deeply, but sometimes divorce reveals character flaws that were always there, just hidden beneath the surface. Let me start by giving you some context about my divorce from my ex-husband Brad and the family dynamics that led to this devastating situation. Brad and I were married for 14 years before divorcing 3 years ago when our daughter Emily was 13. The divorce was primarily Brad's doing, initiated after he had an affair with a woman named Stacy who he met through work. The affair had apparently been going on for over a year before I discovered it, and when confronted, Brad didn't even try to save our marriage. He said he had fallen in love with Stacy and wanted to be with her, that our marriage had been dead for years anyway, and that I should just accept it and move on. The divorce was painful for everyone, but especially for Emily, who adored her father and couldn't understand why he was choosing to leave our family. Brad made a lot of promises during the divorce about how nothing would change between him and Emily, how he would always be there for her, how she was his priority no matter what. He assured her repeatedly that his relationship with Stacy wouldn't affect their father-daughter bond, that he would still be as present and involved in her life as he had always been. Emily, desperate to believe her father, clung to these promises even as I quietly worried that Brad's track record with keeping commitments wasn't particularly strong. Brad married Stacy less than a year after our divorce was finalized, which felt rushed and insensitive given that Emily was still adjusting to the family split. Stacy came with a daughter of her own, Madison, who was 14 at the time, just a year older than Emily. From the beginning, the dynamic between Emily and Madison was awkward. They weren't friends, weren't enemies, just two teenagers forced into a blended family situation neither had asked for. Emily tried to be polite and welcoming, understanding that Madison was also dealing with family changes, but there was never any real connection between them. What became apparent pretty quickly was that Brad seemed determined to win over Madison and Stacy, often at Emily's expense. He would cancel plans with Emily to attend Madison's events. He would buy Madison expensive gifts that he claimed he couldn't afford for Emily. He would post constantly on social media about what an amazing stepdad he was and how lucky he was to have Madison in his life, while barely mentioning Emily at all. It was clear that Brad was trying to prove himself to his new family, trying to show Stacy that he was committed to being a good stepfather to Madison, and Emily became almost an afterthought in his life. I watched this favoritism develop with growing anger and concern. Emily would come home from weekends at Brad's house upset because Madison got to pick all the activities, because Brad and Stacy took Madison shopping while Emily was told they didn't have the budget, because Brad seemed more interested in impressing his stepdaughter than spending quality time with his actual daughter. When I tried to talk to Brad about this, he became defensive, claiming I was being dramatic and trying to turn Emily against him. He said I was jealous of his new family and that I needed to stop poisoning Emily against Stacy and Madison. The situation came to a head around Emily's 16th birthday, which happened 6 months ago. Turning 16 is a big milestone, and Emily had been excited about it for months. She knew that many of her friends were getting cars for their 16th birthdays, but she also knew our financial situation as a single-income household meant I couldn't afford to buy her a car on my own. She never pressured me about it, understanding that I was doing my best to provide for her while also saving for her college education about 3 months before Emily's birthday. Brad called her and made a big show of telling her that he wanted to buy her a car for her 16th birthday. He said it was important to him that she have reliable transportation, that he wanted to contribute something meaningful to this milestone, and that he'd been saving money specifically for this purpose. He told Emily to start looking at cars in the $15,000 to $20,000 range, that they would go car shopping together the month before her birthday, and that this would be a special gift to her. Emily was absolutely thrilled. She spent hours researching different car models, looking at safety ratings and reliability reviews, creating lists of features she wanted. She told all her friends about how her dad was buying her a car, posting excited countdowns on social media. I was cautiously optimistic about Brad's promise, wanting to believe he would follow through for Emily's sake, but also knowing his history of big promises and disappointing follow-through. I warned Emily gently not to get too attached to any specific car until the purchase was actually made, not wanting her to be devastated if Brad backed out. But Emily was so happy and excited that I didn't have the heart to dampen her enthusiasm too much. She trusted her father, believed in his promise, and I hoped I was wrong to doubt him. As Emily's birthday approached, she started asking Brad about when they were going to go car shopping. He kept putting her off with various excuses. He was busy with work, he needed to finalize some financial things, he wanted to wait until closer to her actual birthday to make it more special. Emily accepted these delays, still trusting that her father would come through. Her birthday was on a Saturday, and Brad told her they would go car shopping the following weekend, making it a post-birthday celebration. Emily was fine with this, understanding that coordinating schedules could be complicated. Then, about a week before Emily's birthday, I started noticing concerning posts on social media from Brad and Stacy. They were posting about planning a special surprise trip, being excited about an upcoming adventure, cryptic messages about making memories. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, wondering if this trip had anything to do with the money Brad had supposedly been saving for Emily's car. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that surely Brad wouldn't break such a significant promise to his daughter. Emily's 16th birthday arrived, and Brad took her out to dinner, just the two of them, which was nice. He gave her a card with $100 in it and repeated his promise about the car, saying they would definitely go shopping the following weekend. Emily came home happy, showing me the card and talking excitedly about finally getting to pick out her car in just a few more days. I smiled and celebrated with her, pushing down my growing concerns about whether Brad was actually going to follow through. The following week, Brad started making excuses about why they couldn't go car shopping that weekend. He said something unexpected had come up, that he needed to postpone by a week, but that he definitely hadn't forgotten and the car was still happening. Emily was disappointed but understanding, still trusting her father's promise. She texted him throughout the week about cars she was interested in, sending him links to listings and asking his opinion. His responses were brief and non-committal, which should have been another red flag, but Emily didn't want to see it. Then, the weekend that was supposed to be car shopping weekend, Brad and Stacy posted photos on social media from Hawaii. They were on a luxury vacation with Madison, staying at an expensive resort, posting pictures of beaches and fancy dinners and excursions. Emily saw the posts before I did, coming to me with her phone in hand and tears streaming down her face. She was devastated, finally understanding that her father had lied to her, that the money he'd promised for her car had instead been spent on a vacation for his stepdaughter. I was absolutely furious. I immediately called Brad, demanding to know what the hell he was thinking, how he could break such a significant promise to Emily and then flaunt the vacation he'd taken instead. Brad's response was infuriating. He tried to claim that the Hawaii trip had been planned long before he promised Emily a car, which was an obvious lie given the timeline. When I pointed this out, he switched tactics and said that the trip had been important for family bonding, that Madison had been struggling with the blended family situation and needed this special attention, that Emily would understand eventually that sometimes sacrifices had to be made for the good of the whole family. I told Brad that Emily wasn't part of his whole family in his eyes, apparently, since she was the one being sacrificed. I said that promising your daughter a car and then spending that money on a vacation for your stepdaughter was a betrayal that Emily might never forgive. I demanded to know when he planned to actually buy Emily the car he'd promised. Brad became defensive, saying he didn't currently have the money because the Hawaii trip had been expensive, but that he would save up again and get Emily a car eventually, maybe for Christmas or her graduation. He said Emily needed to learn patience and that not everything in life happens exactly when you want it to. The conversation ended with me telling Brad exactly what kind of father I thought he was, using language I won't repeat here, and him accusing me of being bitter about his new marriage and turning Emily against him. Over the next few days, Brad tried to contact Emily to explain himself, but she refused to answer his calls or texts. She was hurt beyond what I'd ever seen before, feeling betrayed by the one parent she'd thought would never let her down. What made things exponentially worse was Brad's behavior when Emily finally did agree to talk to him. About a week after the Hawaii posts appeared, instead of apologizing profusely and taking responsibility for breaking his promise, Brad went on the offensive. He told Emily that she was being entitled and spoiled, that she should be grateful he'd taken her to a nice dinner for her birthday and given her money, that not every kid gets a car at 16 and she needed to stop acting like he owed her one. He said that his decision about how to spend his money was his business, that the Hawaii trip had been important for his family, and that Emily's reaction was exactly why he'd been hesitant to spoil her with expensive gifts in the first place. Emily was stunned by her father's response. She tried to explain that she wasn't upset about not getting a car in general. She was upset because he had specifically promised her a car, had told her to research and pick one out, had built up her expectations and then broken his promise without even telling her until she found out through social media. Brad dismissed her feelings, saying she was being dramatic and that this was a learning experience about not counting your chickens before they hatch. He actually said that, as if he hadn't been the one making explicit promises and setting expectations. The conversation ended with Emily in tears and Brad apparently feeling justified in his position. He texted me afterwards saying that Emily needed to work on her attitude and her sense of entitlement, that maybe I had spoiled her too much and this was a valuable lesson for her about the real world. I was so angry I had to put my phone down and walk away before I responded in a way I might regret. The audacity of him breaking his daughter's heart and then blaming her for being upset about it was beyond anything I'd imagined. Even from him, the fallout from this situation has been significant and ongoing. Emily has essentially cut contact with Brad, refusing to visit him or engage with his attempts to reach out. She blocked him on social media after he posted something about ungrateful children not appreciating their parents' sacrifices, which was clearly directed at her. She told me she doesn't want a relationship with someone who would lie to her face, break important promises, and then blame her for being hurt about it. As her mother, I support her decision even though part of me hopes they can eventually repair their relationship. Brad's family has weighed in on the situation, unfortunately taking his side because they only heard his version of events, where Emily is the entitled brat who got upset about not receiving an expensive gift. Brad's mother called me saying I needed to make Emily apologize to her father for cutting him off, that Emily was being manipulated by me to punish Brad for the divorce. I set the record straight about what actually happened, explaining that Brad had made a specific promise, broken it to spend money on his stepdaughter instead, and then called Emily entitled when she was hurt. Brad's mother was quieter after hearing the full story, but she still suggested that Emily should be more understanding of Brad's position as a stepfather trying to blend his family. The contrast between how Brad treats Emily versus how he treats Madison has become even more stark since this incident. He continues to post constantly about Madison, about what a great kid she is, about special outings and gifts he's given her. Meanwhile, Emily's name rarely appears on his social media, and when it does, it's usually in the context of him playing the victim about his daughter not speaking to him. He's crafted a narrative where he's the wronged father and Emily is the difficult child who can't accept his new family, completely ignoring his role in creating this situation through his broken promise and favoritism. What's been interesting is watching some of Brad and Stacy's friends and family members reach out to me privately to express their concern about the situation. Several people have told me they witnessed Brad's favoritism toward Madison and his neglect of Emily, that they'd tried to talk to him about it, but he was defensive and dismissive. A few have apologized for not speaking up sooner, saying they didn't want to interfere in his parenting but now regret their silence. Their validation of what I'd been seeing has been helpful, confirming that I wasn't imagining the favoritism or being overly sensitive on Emily's behalf. Emily is in therapy now, working through her feelings about her father's betrayal and the breakdown of their relationship. Her therapist has been helpful in allowing Emily to process her grief and anger, and in helping her understand that her father's behavior is about his own issues and limitations, not about her worth or value as a person. The therapist has also worked with Emily on setting boundaries and understanding that she's allowed to protect herself from relationships that hurt her, even when those relationships are with parents. As for the car situation, I couldn't afford to buy Emily the car her father had promised, but I did work with my parents to help her get a reliable used car a few months after her birthday. It's not the newer model she'd been researching with her father, but it's safe and dependable, and Emily is grateful for it. More importantly, it was a promise we made and kept, showing her that some people's words can be trusted even when others cannot. My parents were happy to help, especially knowing that Brad had broken his promise so callously. The entire situation has taught Emily some difficult but valuable lessons about trust, about managing expectations, and about the reality that parents are human and capable of profound disappointment. She's learned to be more cautious about believing promises, particularly from her father, and to guard her heart against expecting too much from people who have proven unreliable. These aren't lessons I wanted her to learn this way, through heartbreak and betrayal, but they're lessons that will serve her well as she navigates adult relationships. I've also learned some things through this experience, primarily about letting go of hope that Brad will ever be the father Emily deserves. I spent years making excuses for him, giving him chances, hoping he would step up and prioritize his daughter. This situation made it clear that Brad's priorities are his new family, his image as a good stepfather, and his own convenience in that order. Emily falls somewhere much further down the list, and no amount of hoping or pushing will change that. Accepting this reality has been painful but also freeing, allowing me to stop expecting better from him and focus instead on being the consistent, reliable parent Emily can count on. Looking at the situation now, 6 months later, I can see that Emily is actually better off with the distance from Brad. She was constantly being hurt by his favoritism and his broken promises, constantly feeling like she wasn't enough to earn her father's full attention and commitment. Now, with the relationship essentially over, she's not experiencing those constant small cuts anymore. The initial wound of his betrayal was deep, but it was clean and definitive, allowing her to begin healing rather than constantly being re-injured by his behavior. Brad occasionally makes half-hearted attempts to reconnect with Emily, usually around holidays or her birthday, sending gifts or cards with messages about how he loves her and hopes they can work things out. Emily typically doesn't respond, having told me she's not interested in a relationship with someone who would hurt her so badly and then refuse to take responsibility for it. She says that if he wants to repair their relationship, he needs to start with a genuine apology that acknowledges what he did wrong, not more empty words about loving her. So far, that apology hasn't come, and I'm not holding my breath waiting for it. What I want other parents in similar situations to understand is that favoritism and broken promises can cause lasting damage to your relationship with your child. Brad thought he could get away with prioritizing his stepdaughter over his daughter because Emily loved him and would forgive him eventually. What he didn't account for was that every person, including children, has a breaking point where the pain of maintaining a relationship exceeds the benefit of that relationship. Emily reached that breaking point when her father broke a significant promise, spent the money on his stepdaughter instead, and then called her entitled for being hurt about it. If you're a parent in a blended family, I urge you to be scrupulously fair with your children and stepchildren. Don't make promises to one child that you're not willing to keep, especially if you're going to turn around and spend that money on another child. Don't prioritize your stepchildren to the point where your biological children feel abandoned or less important. And if you do make a mistake, own it, apologize sincerely, and make it right rather than doubling down and blaming the child for being hurt. Brad could have salvaged his relationship with Emily if he'd handled the car situation differently, if he'd been honest from the beginning or had genuinely apologized when the truth came out. Instead, he chose defensiveness and blame, and he lost his daughter as a result. For anyone wondering whether Emily will ever reconcile with her father, I honestly don't know. She's 16 now, almost 17, and will be an adult soon, making her own decisions about relationships without my input. If Brad continues on his current path, expecting Emily to chase his approval while offering nothing but disappointment and blame, I don't see reconciliation happening. But if Brad ever develops the self-awareness to recognize what he's done and the willingness to make genuine amends, there might be hope. Children generally want to have relationships with their parents and are willing to forgive a lot if the parent shows genuine remorse and commitment to doing better. The question is whether Brad is capable of that level of growth and accountability. My name is Jennifer. I'm 42 years old, and this is my story of how my ex-husband promised our daughter a car for her 16th birthday, spent the money on an expensive vacation for his stepdaughter instead, lied about it, and then called our daughter entitled when she discovered the truth through social media. It's been 6 months since the betrayal, and Emily and Brad's relationship remains broken, possibly beyond repair. As Emily's mother, I've had to watch her heartbreak and help her pick up the pieces, all while managing my own anger at Brad for his selfishness and his willingness to hurt his daughter to prioritize his new family. We're moving forward, Emily and I, building a life where promises are kept and people are valued for who they are, not where they fall in someone's list of priorities. Brad can keep posting about what an amazing stepfather he is. Emily and I know the truth about what kind of father he actually is, and that truth will eventually catch up with him. Thank you for listening to our story.